everybody, it's Kira and welcome back to my channel. So today I have my July wrap up for you guys. Yes, it is late, but I've been having lots of fun here in Oxford, so yeah, we're just gonna get right to the books that I read last month. So I started the month by finishing off the Nixia trilogy with Nixia Uprising, which is obviously the third book in the series. It was very well done. I have a full review for it that will be coming soon, hopefully as soon as I get around to editing it. But I finished it on like the first day of August, or on like the first or second day of July or something, because I read most of it in June. But yeah, this is the conclusion to the sci-fi trilogy of the Nixia universe. It was so well done, such a good ending. Still like twists and turns, not as many like plot twists as were in the first two, I think. But that's okay because like everything came together and came to a really satisfying conclusion, so I was very happy with it. And then I finished up the Chronicles of Narnia with The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle. So I had to read these for my Oxford class for coming here. And Dawn Treader, I had forgotten how different it was from the movie, because the movie is nothing like the book. Silver Chair, I didn't mind, but it's not one of my favorites. I don't love Puddleglum, I'll be honest, which is kind of sad because like he is an interesting character, but he's not one of my favorites. But I do love his speech at the end about living in, like believing in Aslan and living in Narnia, even if it isn't real. And then The Last Battle, I've only read The Last Battle like a couple times, mostly because the audiobook version that like my family listens to is like, I always thought it was kind of scary, and so I like stayed away from it because it was scary and I didn't want to listen to it. So it was very interesting like reading The Last Battle and again, and I don't know, I don't really have any new thoughts to share on The Last Battle as of now, but it was a fun time. I'm glad I reread this entire series. Still one of my absolute favorite series of all time. It's just very well done and I quite enjoy them. And then I read Again But Better by Christine Riccio, and oh my goodness, I loved this book. So this is about a girl who is going, it starts off with this girl who is starting her junior year of college, and she's on a pre-med track going to be a doctor, but she decides to take this opportunity to study abroad in London, and she doesn't tell her parents, but it's actually a creative writing course that she takes. She goes and studies abroad for a couple of months and everything is wonderful. There's a guy that she's like kind of falling in love with on her trip. And then her parents find out that she faked the whole trip, like that they thought she was going to study medicine, but she was actually studying creative writing. And so they get really mad at her and like everything blows up and the end of the trip is a disaster. And then it fast forwards like 5 or 6 years into the future and she's actually given a chance to go back and redo her whole trip again. And it was an amazing book. It was really cool because I read it right before I left for this Oxford trip, and so I am also going into my junior year of college. I'm not going for pre-med, but I am going for a literature and creative writing courses, and so it was just really cool to hear about somebody else's study abroad experiences right before I was going on mine. The love story was super cute and I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of Lost references, which was super fun. There were definitely moments where it got cheesy, and I feel like sometimes that happens in contemporaries. Like it can get a little bit like too much, like if you're trying to throw in references to so many different things. So I don't love contemporaries in general for that reason, that it can sometimes feel like you're trying too hard to fit your references in. But it was such an enjoyable read. I loved it. I really need to get my own copy of it because it was a really good book and I'm very glad that I read it. Then I read The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I had never read this book, but I needed to read it for my class. It tells the story of like a demon to a lesser demon and like telling ways that they can like keep the humans away, the patients they're called, away from Christianity and away from being saved. And it was very interesting. We actually talked about in my class, like, if you tried to write the inverse of it, of like an angel talking to a lesser angel, it actually wouldn't be as interesting, because the thing that makes it interesting is the fact that it's coming from like an evil perspective, and it's coming from somebody who is trying to keep them away from things that are necessarily good. There was a lot of really interesting points that it brought up, and definitely some lines where I was like, oof, that hits me. But it was super well written and really cool, and most people, whether you're religious or not, enjoy the Screwtape Letters, so I would say give it a read. It's really interesting and makes a lot of commentary on humans in general and the state of our world, and I don't know, it was very interesting and I quite enjoyed it. And then after that, I read Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which is one of his lesser known books, but it retells the myth of Psyche and Cupid. And I didn't like this book. I was one of the few from my class that didn't, but part of that I think had to do with it was the last book for my class that I was reading, and so I was just like, can I please just be done with this already? Part of it was I didn't really know the original myth. I like looked it up a little bit, but I didn't realize that it definitely strays from the original myth. It is not the same myth. And so I kept expecting things to happen that happened in the myth, but it didn't happen in the book, and so I was just a little confused. And I just didn't care about the characters. I don't know. There definitely are very interesting points to be made about feminism and female power in the book, because it follows Psyche's sister, who is ugly and has been told she's ugly her whole life. My class had an interesting discussion on whether or not she actually was ugly, because the few people that actually see her face don't ever comment that it's awful. It's just not amazing and beautiful like Psyche. So I enjoyed the discussion surrounding the book, and I came to a better appreciation for the book during our discussion, but reading it, I was just like, nah, I don't really care about this. After I finished my books for school, I had like one day in between finishing books for school and the start of the Reading Rush readathon, and I was like, what do I read? So my sister actually had a book that's called Pegasus, the Flame of Olympus by Kate O'Hearn. This is a middle grade book, and it's about a girl who finds a Pegasus that lands on her roof. She lives in New York City, and the Pegasus lands on her roof. And then it also follows a boy who's an Olympian. He's a thief, and he gets cast down and ends up meeting up with the girl and trying to help find Pegasus. It was a quite enjoyable book. The biggest problem I had was that it was trying to be Greek mythology, but it kept referring to them by their Roman names. So it was just like the gods and goddesses kept referring to them by like their Roman names. So like it was Jupiter instead of Zeus, and I was just very confused as to why that was happening. Like I couldn't tell if it was trying to be Greek or if it was trying to be Roman, and it just needed to pick one. But it was quite enjoyable. Definitely middle grade, like very simple language and stuff. And the main character I think was like 11. But it was a really fun read, and it was cool to like talk with my sister because she had already finished reading it both when I started, and so being able to be like, oh, I'm at this part and this just happened, and being able to talk with her about it was super fun. It just made the reading experience much better. So I'm not going to continue with the series. I don't really need to. It's just something fun in between books, but I do encourage you, if you enjoy middle grade, or have people in your life that do enjoy middle grade and like Pegasus related things or Greek mythology. There was a lot to do with like themes of family and loss as the main character, and then her friend that she meets up with, not the Olympian, but there's this other boy that she ends up getting help from, and they both have like difficult lives, and so I was very intrigued with how, like I was very impressed with how they dealt with the subject matter that came up in the book. I don't know, it was very well done, so I quite enjoyed it. And then we get to the books that I read for the reading rush, which I have 2 vlogs for, so I will link them down below. So I will just read off what I read. So I read Matilda, which was the first time that I've reread it in a long time. Quite a fun read. I read If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson, and I enjoyed it. I probably won't ever reread it, but it was a good book. I read What World Is Left by Monique Polak, a historical fiction about a Polish girl, no, about a girl from Holland who gets sent to a concentration camp. Very hard to read, as all books set in that time period are, but really well done. Sauvé by Celia Reese. I'd had this one on my shelves for forever, so I finally read it. It's said to be a Robin Hood retelling, but it's really not. It's more a political intrigue book about a girl during the French Revolution, but she lives in England. So it's like a little bit after the American Revolution, but like right before or during the French Revolution in England. And then the last book that I read in August was My Oxford Year by Julia Whelan. And this was another one very similar to Again But Better, where the main character was coming to Oxford actually this time instead of London. She's coming to Oxford as a part of a student exchange, like a study abroad trip. Sure, hers was much more high-end, and I cannot remember the name of the scholarship that she gets, but she gets a really fancy scholarship. But that one was so much more fun because I read it on like my second day in Oxford, and there was a lot of places that she went to that I was like, oh, I remember going past there, or, oh, I'll have to check that out. Reading a book about some place that you know or you've been to is much more fun because you get to like see all the different places that you've been. So that was quite enjoyable, and it was a nice read to end my month on. So yeah, I read 13 books in the month of July. It was quite a good reading month, and I'm very excited to... August has definitely slowed down, and it will continue to slow as school starts up, but I am excited for what is ahead. So that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to follow me on social media, all my links are in the description as always. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!